It started on one of those nights where sleep just doesn't come. The air was heavy with stillness, and every sound in the apartment seemed amplified. The soft whir of the ceiling fan, the ticking clock on the nightstand, the occasional creak of old wood shifting under time's weight. I lay in bed, wide-eyed, red glow of my alarm clock casting long shadows across the walls. 3:17 a.m. Then it happened. A scream, so sharp and raw, it sliced through the silence like a razor. It wasn't just loud, it was wrong. It carried something ancient, something primal. Fear. Pure, unfiltered terror. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and rushed to the window, yanking the curtains aside with shaking hands. My apartment overlooked a narrow street, flanked by identical two-story buildings and sleepy houses. Everything below was bathed in the cold yellow haze of a flickering street lamp. Empty, not a single soul in sight, no one else stirred, no lights flicked on. No car engines rumbled awake. The street was just still. I stood there frozen, waiting for someone to come outside, for another scream, for anything. But the silence returned just as quickly as the scream had come, thick and suffocating, like the world had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe. Again, the next morning, I asked around, just subtle things. Casual comments to neighbors I usually only nodded at in the hallway. An elderly woman who walked her dog at sunrise. The guy across the hall who always smelled like weed and old cologne. I asked if they heard anything strange last night. Any loud noises. Maybe someone fighting. Nothing. Blank stares. One even laughed and asked if I'd been watching horror movies again. No, man. Seriously. I insisted. It was a scream. Someone was terrified. Did you check your dreams first? He said, grinning. Maybe it was all up here. He tapped his temple, then shrugged and disappeared behind his door. But it wasn't a dream. I could still hear it. That voice piercing and guttural, filled with a desperation I've never heard before or since. It had echoed in my ears long, after it stopped, as if it had imprinted itself into my skull. Even now, walking down the street, I found myself turning my head toward alleyways and rooftops, expecting to see someone, anyone, waiting to scream again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. I sat in my bed staring at the dark window, watching the shadows crawl and stretch with every passing car. Midnight passed. Then 1 a.m., then 2:30. Just as I began to nod off, it came again. The same scream, but this time, it was closer and longer. It tore through the night like something dying, something begging, a hollow human sound that shouldn't have belonged in a world as quiet as mine. I was out of bed in seconds, phone in hand, racing to the window. Again, nothing. The street remained unchanged. No open doors. No figures running. No one crying for help. Just the buzzing street lamp. And the night pressing in like a vice. I brought the phone to my ear and dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up with that same rehearsed calm. 911, what's your emergency? I heard a scream, I said. Someone screaming for help. Just now. It's the second night in. You need to send someone location? I gave her the street name, the apartment number, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. Then, in a tone far too casual for the situation, she said, "We've had no other reports. Are you sure it wasn't a dream? Or maybe a TV left on." "It wasn't a goddamn dream," I snapped. "Someone is out there screaming." Another. Pause. I heard faint typing. "Sir," she said, now slightly annoyed. "If we get multiple calls about this, we'll dispatch someone. Until then, just try to get some sleep." The line cut out. Just like that. Static buzzed faintly in my ear, and for a second I thought the call had dropped. But then I pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. No call timer. No disconnect notice. Just a pulsing static hum. And it was getting louder. That's when I realized something was wrong. The sound wasn't coming from my phone anymore. It was coming from inside my apartment. I stood in the middle of my dark bedroom, phone still in hand, turning slowly, trying to pinpoint the source of the hum. It felt like it was vibrating through the floor, up through my feet and into my spine. The kind of sound that isn't just heard, it's felt. The hum turned to a whisper. Low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but it had a cadence. Like someone was muttering in a language I didn't understand. I backed toward the door, hands trembling, eyes wide. My gaze darted to the shadows that pooled in the corners of the room, growing thicker, like ink bleeding into water. And then, from the hallway behind my bedroom door, the scream came again. This time, it was right there. It didn't echo from outside. It didn't pierce the walls of someone else's home. It came from inside mine, right outside my door. The scream outside my door was unlike anything I had ever heard. It didn't sound human anymore. It was too warped, too guttural, as though pain itself had taken form and learned how to speak. It reverberated through the wood, shaking the frame, sending tiny vibrations up the floorboards and into my legs. I stood there, frozen, my back pressed against the opposite wall, too afraid to breathe. I stared at the door, its surface trembling ever so slightly. Something was on the other side, something that knew I was there. My phone was still clutched, in my hand, slick with sweat. I tried dialing 911 again, but when I pressed the call button, the screen glitched. The numbers flickered, scrambled into symbols I didn't recognize, almost like runes or glyphs, and then it went black. Just a faint red dot blinking at the top corner of the screen like a heartbeat monitor. The scream had stopped, but the silence that replaced it was worse. I knew what silence was supposed to feel like. This wasn't it. This was suffocating, pressurized. It was the kind of silence you feel in your bones, as if the entire world were leaning in to listen to your fear. I stepped closer to the door, moving slowly, every board beneath my feet, groaning under the weight of dread. My hand hovered inches from the knob, and I told myself, just check, just open it a crack. Maybe someone needs help. But I didn't believe that, not really, because the scream, it hadn't sounded like a plea for help. It had sounded like a warning. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the knob. That's when the whispers returned. They slithered under the door, rising like steam-sharp, sibilant voices all layered atop each other. Some were pleading, some were weeping. Others were laughing, quietly, mockingly. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel the intent behind them. And whatever they were saying, it was meant for me. I stumbled back again, heart in my throat. The door creaked open, just a sliver without me touching it. I froze. Through that narrow crack, I saw only blackness. Not the darkness of an unlit hallway, but the kind that swallows light whole. It seemed to pulse, to breathe. The air pouring through that gap was cold and damp, and it smelled like mildew, rot and ... iron. Blood. I should have run. I should have slammed the door and locked myself in my room until morning. But something deeper took hold. Not curiosity. Not even bravery. Obsession. I needed to know what was out there. Because no one else believed me. If I couldn't prove it to them, then I had to prove it to myself. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. Just a long stretch of wooden floor and peeling wallpaper. My apartment was quiet again. But I didn't feel alone. I took a step forward, then another. The light above flickered and went out. That's when I heard the scream again, but this time, it wasn't in front of me. It was inside my head. I clutched my temples as the sound exploded behind. My eyes, like someone was standing inside my skull and shrieking straight into my thoughts. My vision doubled. I stumbled against the wall, biting back a cry. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. I stood there panting, dizzy, nauseated. My head throbbed with the weight of something invisible, something I couldn't name. My ears rang, not with silence, but with the memory of that impossible volume. And from somewhere beneath my feet, I heard something new, footsteps slow, deliberate. They echoed from the basement. I blinked. The basement. My building had one, but I'd never been down there. My landlord had made it clear when I moved in. Storage is off limits. Old junk, some dangerous wiring. Don't go down there. It's sealed anyway. But as I crept through the hall and reached the end, I saw the door to the basement slightly ajar. A faint light flickered below, pale and sickly green, like the color of fluorescent tubes gone bad. I paused at the top of the stairs. My breath fogged in front of my mouth like it was the dead of winter, even though it was mid-June. The steps groaned with every shift in weight, as if they resented being disturbed. Something called to me from the dark below, not a voice but a pull, a compulsion. My skin prickled with static electricity, and the hair on my arms stood up. I took the first step, then the second. Halfway down, the door behind me creaked shut. And I jumped. I whipped around, but no one was there. That's when the whispering returned. Only this time, it was all around me. Not from one direction, everywhere. They were beneath the stairs, above my head, beside my ear. I heard my name over and over in voices that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Some were familiar, others were strangers. Some sounded like they were choking. Some sounded like they were smiling. I gripped the banister, knuckles white, and kept going. When I reached the bottom, the floor was damp and sticky beneath my feet. I swung my phone's flashlight around the room. Shadows scattered. Like insects. The basement was massive, far bigger than it had any right to be. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes, furniture, tarps. In the center of the room was something that didn't belong, a large black door steel, plated, bolted and covered in strange symbols that looked carved into the surface. And just in front of it, something moved. A hunched figure, swaying, breathing. Then it screamed, and this time I screamed with it, not out of fear, but because for a moment the scream sounded exactly like my voice. The scream that echoed. Through the basement was a mirror of my own, a haunting replication of my voice, distorted just enough to sound wrong. Like hearing a recording of yourself played back too slow, stretched at the edges, dipped in something vile. I staggered, backward, my flashlight beam flickering wildly across rusted shelves and crates as the hunched figure slowly began to rise. It didn't stand the way a person stands. It uncoiled. Its limbs stretched too far, its joints bending the wrong way. Every movement made the air feel heavier, like the basement itself was sinking under the weight of its presence. I aimed the flashlight at its face, but the beam dimmed the closer it got to the thing, as if the light refused to touch it. Its features remained hidden in shifting shadow, though I could make out a twisted grin, wide and unnatural. The figure didn't approach. It turned its head toward the black metal door, the one covered in symbols, and let out a low, wet hiss before it sank back into the darkness, disappearing behind the rusted shelves like it had never been there. At all. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Every nerve screamed at me to run back up the stairs, to pretend I had never seen any of this. But my legs wouldn't move. My eyes were locked on that strange door, and worse, the screams had stopped. All of them, gone. That awful chorus of agony had vanished the moment the creature disappeared. I hadn't realized how constant the background noise had become until the silence returned. But this wasn't the same oppressive quiet from before. This was anticipatory, like the entire room was holding its breath. I took a cautious step forward, crunching broken glass beneath my shoe. Then another. My flashlight trembled in my grip. I couldn't look away from the door. Its surface shimmered like oil, reflecting something that wasn't the room around it. The symbols looked carved from bone rather than etched in metal, and they seemed to twist and pulse when I focused too. Belong on any of them. The closer I got, the more I realized that something about the door was wrong on a dimensional level. It didn't sit flat against the wall. It was like it bent space around it, like it shouldn't be able to exist in this basement or anywhere in this world. I reached out and placed my palm against the cold metal. The surface was slick, almost slimy, like it was breathing through the pores of the steel. And then the door began to hum, low at first, a soft vibration that tickled the bones in my fingers. Then it intensified, spreading through my arm, my chest, all the way up into my skull. I heard voices in that hum. Whispers not outside, but within, carried through the marrow of my body like electrical current. They were chanting something. Over. Let us through. Let us through. Let us through. I ripped my hand back, stumbling away in a panic, and the humming stopped instantly. I stood there panting, the flashlight now dimmed to a weak glow, barely illuminating the floor in front of me. I had to get out. I had to, but the door creaked open. Just a sliver. From that sliver, a thin tendril of shadow slithered out and touched the concrete. It looked like smoke, but it moved with intent, curling toward my feet. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of boxes with a crash, but the sound didn't echo. It was like the noise was swallowed whole. Then the scream returned, but this time it didn't come from the hallway or the room, or even my head. It came from my mouth. I didn't mean to scream. It was wrenched from me, forced like air from crushed lungs. My jaw unhinged painfully as something used me to let itself out. I collapsed to my knees, clutching at my throat, gasping, wheezing. From behind the door, I heard it. Footsteps, many of them, running. They were coming, through the crack, through the gap I hadn't opened, but had still allowed. I scrambled to my feet and back toward the stairs, my flashlight now just flickering in irregular pulses. As I turned to run, I heard a click. The basement door at the top of the stairs, the one that led back to my apartment, slammed shut. I'd bolted up the stairs anyway, pounding on the door with both fists, shouting until my throat burned, but no one heard me. Not the neighbors, not the police, not anyone. I was alone down there, except for them. Then I heard the last thing I expected. A voice, clear, calm, and familiar. "Why'd you come down here?" I spun around. Standing at the base of the stairs was a man or something wearing a man's skin. His face was a blend of people I knew. My neighbor. My high school math teacher. My father. His smile was too wide. His eyes didn't match. "I was just trying to help," I said hoarsely. The figure grinned wider. "You did." He stepped aside. And behind him, the door groaned open wider on its own, revealing ... darkness. But in that darkness, shapes began to move. They had been waiting. I should have turned back. I should have screamed, fought, clawed my way through that basement door and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there at the top of the stairs, frozen, my breath fogging in the cold air, staring down into the widening crack of that impossible door. From its depths, figures began to pour out, not in a rush, not a stampede. No, they slithered, crawled, unfolded from the void like wet laundry pulled from some black ocean. They didn't have faces, not really. They had masks. Paper white, featureless, smooth as porcelain. But their mouths, those screaming mouths, stretched wide beneath hollow eyes. No sound came from them now, but I could feel it. Their agony vibrated through my bones like tinnitus in the soul. They were pain personified, and every single one of them was looking at me. I backed away from the door, tripping over my own feet, the flashlight in my hand finally dying completely. The only light now came from that cursed door pulsing dim red, like a heartbeat, lighting the basement with every slow, heavy thump. The smiling man, the amalgamation of faces, watched me with his head tilted slightly, as if studying me. "They were silent for so long," he said softly. "You gave them voice? What are they?" I choked out. He didn't answer at first. He simply turned to face the creatures as they gathered in the basement, hunched and shivering, their long limbs twitching like broken puppets. Then he looked back at me. "They are echoes," he said. "Screams that went unheard. Cries that were ignored. Pleas left unanswered." "That doesn't make sense," I whispered, the chill sinking into my skin. "They're just noise." His expression didn't change. "And yet, you heard them when no one else did." As he spoke, one of the masked figures lunged forward, crawling up the stairs on all fours like a spider, its joints cracking with every movement. I stumbled back, but it stopped a few feet away from me. It tilted its head, mimicking the man. From behind the mask, I heard it, my voice but warped and saturated in anguish. Why didn't you come sooner? I gasped, stumbling against the basement wall. My heart felt like it had frozen mid-beat. No, no, that's not me. But I knew it was. It was my voice from that night. The night I heard the scream and did nothing. The night I told myself it wasn't real. The night I went back to sleep. More of them crawled forward now. Dozens of masked things, each whispering with voices I recognized. Some were mine. Some were people I'd forgotten. People I'd walked past. A woman sobbing. A child's panicked breath. A man begging for someone. Anyone to help him. All their pain had funneled into this place. The smiling man gestured to them. They don't want revenge. They want release. And now that you've heard them, you're their anchor? My knees buckled. I didn't ask for this. You don't have to. It heard you. The red light pulsed again, and I felt it behind me another door. I turned to see it, identical to the first, etched with symbols, but this time it bore my name. My real, full name, carved into the center in jagged, bleeding letters. The creatures turned as well, slowly crawling toward it, drawn like moths. To a flame, the smiling man stepped close, too close. I could feel heat radiating off him now. They will pass through you, into the world, through your memory, through your guilt. Your fear is the door. What happens if I don't open it? I asked. His smile faded. They will scream forever. Behind us, the things had started to wail again. Their voices clawed into the air like broken glass, building and building, each note layering atop the last until I thought my ears would bleed. I dropped to the ground, hands over my head, screaming along with them. The smiling man whispered, "But if you open it, you become one of us, a shepherd of pain." A warden of echoes. My body shook as I looked back at the red-lit door. My name burned brighter now, flickering with anticipation. I could end it. The noise, the torment, the endless screaming. All I had to do was open it. But something deep inside, something still. Human fought back. I stood up, rage and fear churning in equal measure. No, I won't carry them. I won't be your anchor. The smiling man's face cracked, literally split down the middle like ceramic. From within, a new face emerged, one I recognized. Mine. He was me. A version twisted by guilt. A version that had opened the door. Too late, he said with my voice. You already did. Then the door blew wide open, and everything went white. When I came to, I was no longer in the basement. I was lying on my living room floor, drenched in sweat, the dim light of dawn. Peeking through the blinds, my phone was next to me, buzzing repeatedly with missed calls and unread messages. The red door, the masked figures, the man with my face gone, like a fever dream. But the silence wasn't right. It wasn't peaceful or calm. It was waiting. Every breath I took felt wrong, as if the air didn't want to enter my lungs. My ears strained, almost desperate for any sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the traffic, outside, even birds. But there was nothing. Not even the sound of my own breathing. That was the first sign something had followed me. The second came when I tried to speak. Hello? I whispered, but no sound came out. Not just quiet. Not just a whisper. Nothing. I clutched my throat, panicked. My lips moved, my vocal cords strained, but the world rejected my voice. It was like it had been stolen, sucked away into that doorway, and locked behind my name. I turned on the TV. Static. Tried the radio. Dead air. I ran to my window, opened it, leaned out into the early morning light. The world outside moved, but silently. Cars drove past. A jogger ran by. A dog barked at something in the distance. But it was all muted. It was like I was watching everything through glass. No one looked up. No one noticed me. My scream of frustration never reached my own ears. I stumbled back from the window, heart pounding. My world had been sealed off. Whatever I'd done in the basement, whatever I'd opened, it had cut me off from everything normal. And then I saw it. My mirror. Across the room, hanging crookedly on the hallway wall, the mirror shimmered. I stared into it, hoping. for some sense of grounding, but what I saw wasn't me. It looked like me, but twisted, eyes too dark, mouth too wide, head cocked in that unnatural way, smiling. He raised a hand and pressed it to the inside of the glass. I stepped closer, my own hand rising without thinking, drawn to it. As soon as my fingers touched the mirror's surface, his lips moved, and I heard it not out loud but inside my head. You brought them back. Now you listen. The mirror shattered with a deafening scream, the first sound I'd heard since waking up. I stumbled back, covering my ears. But it wasn't just noise, it was hundreds of voices, screaming in unison like a dam had broken. They spilled into the room, clawing at my mind, some sobbing, some begging, some accusing. You heard me, and you did nothing. Why didn't you help? Why did you open the door? I collapsed to my knees, clutching my skull, trying to force them out, but the more I fought, the louder they became. They weren't just screaming into the air. They were screaming through me. I crawled to the bathroom, slammed the door, and turned on the sink. The water rushed out. Thankfully, it sounded normal. But when I looked into the mirror above the sink, it wasn't my face staring back. It was one of the masked ones, and it was crying. Black tears streamed from hollow eye sockets, soaking the porcelain white mask. It raised its head slowly. Free us ... or become one of us. I screamed. Again, soundless, and smashed the mirror with my elbow. The pieces rained down in silence. I was losing it. I knew it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was reality now. The voices, the broken soundscape, the echoes inside my skull, they weren't hallucinations. They were hauntings. Not of ghosts, but of suffering. By nightfall, my apartment felt like a prison. No light stayed on for more than a few minutes. My reflection had vanished entirely, every mirror now a blank surface of shifting shadows. My voice still wouldn't return, and every now and then, the TV would flicker on with static only to display my face, bleeding from the mouth, mouthing words I couldn't hear, and always those screams, not constant anymore, but lurking, waiting for a quiet moment, a blink, a heartbeat. That's when they would surge back, flooding my senses, bringing me to my knees. That's when I realized it wasn't about freeing them anymore. They weren't trapped. I was trapped in a dimension of grief, guilt, and soundless horror. A place where forgotten screams had found a vessel. A place where silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. I tried to leave. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and fled the apartment. But the second I stepped outside, the world warped. Colors inverted. Buildings stretched into impossible shapes. And dozens of people stood perfectly still on the street, their faces turned toward me. Every single one wore a white mask, and every single one was screaming silently. I ran. God, I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out. But I never left the block. No matter which direction I sprinted, I always ended up in front of my building. It was the only thing that hadn't changed. Like it was waiting for me, my echo chamber. I've stopped keeping track of the days. It doesn't matter anymore. Time here doesn't flow. It drips like the echo of a scream that never fades, just stretches thinner and thinner until it's a part of everything. The clocks still tick, but the hands never move. The sun rises and sets, but never warms the room. My phone battery has been stuck at 1% for what feels like forever. And the worst part? I'm not alone. Not in a traditional sense. There are no neighbors, no police, no family trying to reach out. But the masks, they watch me. I see them outside my window, standing still as statues in the empty street. I see their outlines and reflections that no longer belong to me. They appear in doorways, corners, the far ends of long hallways that stretch further than physics should allow. They never get closer, but they never leave. And each time I blink, there are more of them. I used to scream back at them, try to fight the silence, but I don't have a voice anymore. Not in the way I did. Now, when I open my mouth, the sound that comes out isn't mine. It's theirs. I spoke once, days ago, or whatever passes for a day here, and what came out was a blood-curdling wail, full of grief and pain and suffering that didn't belong to me. It was a little girl's scream. After that, I didn't try again. I know what I've become. This place isn't a punishment. It's a purpose. That red door, it didn't take me, it changed me. And now I'm something new, a conduit, a living broadcast tower for voices that were once silenced. When I sleep, if I can even call it that, I dream of tragedies. Fires, car crashes, drownings, slow deaths in empty rooms. And every time I see someone looking for help, someone screaming, and someone me walking by unaware, oblivious, I wake up screaming in someone else's voice. Sometimes I feel them inside me. Like flickers of consciousness, thoughts that aren't mine, memories of moments I never lived. I felt a woman's last breath in a locked freezer. I felt a child's panic while locked in a trunk. I felt the fury of a man whose cries for help were laughed off as madness before he took his own life. They're all in here with me now. Part of me, I thought it would drive me insane. Maybe it has. But after a while, the line between their agony and mine blurred. We are not separate. We are not strangers. We are echoes. I used to wonder why I was the one who heard this scream that night. Why no one else could. Why everyone insisted the world was silent. But I know now, the ones who can hear were rare. We're the ones who are meant to carry the voices forward. The universe doesn't reward empathy. It burdens it. And those who listen become the next ones to be heard. Tonight, something is different. The masks are all gone. The hallway is dark, stretching on endlessly, and my apartment door has vanished completely. In its place is the red door. The same one. My name is still carved into it, but the letters are deeper now, fresh, like they were cut just moments ago. It pulses slowly, dull and red, like a warning or an invitation. And I know that if I open it again, I won't come back. Not as me, but maybe I'm okay with that. I'm tired. I've tried to fight this, to understand it, to outrun it. But the truth is, I was never meant to escape. I was never meant to survive. I was meant to listen. I was meant to become something that never forgets. A memorial? A vessel. I approach the door. My hand doesn't tremble this time. There's no fear left. Just acceptance. Purpose. My fingers wrap around the handle, and I can feel the warmth of hundreds of lives pressing against the other side, ready to speak, ready to scream, ready to be heard. And as I open it, the screams don't terrify me. They welcome me. I don't think anyone will find this journal. But if they do, if you're reading this, and one night, when the world is still, you hear a scream that no one else notices, don't ignore it, because if you do, you'll hear it again. And again, louder each time, until finally it's you scream no one else can hear, and your voice will be the next to join us forever. I've always had trouble sleeping. Most nights, I lie in bed for hours, eyes fixed to the ceiling as my thoughts spiral in the dark. It's not new, I've wrestled with insomnia since I was a kid, but something about the last few nights feels different. Not just restless. Wrong. My apartment sits on the top floor of a quiet old building, nestled on a street that most people forget exists. The creaky pipes and humming refrigerator used to be a kind of comfort, constant reminders I wasn't completely alone. But 3 nights ago, something changed. It started subtle, like most bad things do. I was nearly asleep finally when I heard it. A sound so faint I thought it might be in my head. A soft, deliberate tapping, like a long fingernail gently rapping against. The wooden floor? Not random, not frantic. Rhythmic. I froze. The noise came from directly beneath my bed. For a while I told myself it was just the old building settling. Maybe a pipe shifting or a branch brushing the window. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and stayed very still, ears straining against the silence. The tapping continued, slow, Deliberate, like something trying not to be noticed, but wanting to be heard. Tap, tap. I counted the beats in my head. 6 seconds between each one. Always six. Always the same. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to nothing. The silence pressed down like a weight, heavier than the blanket. When my alarm finally buzzed at 6:30 a.m., I realized I hadn't slept at all. The next morning, I chalked it up to exhaustion. Maybe I had dreamed it, hovering in that strange space between sleep and waking. Maybe my mind, already restless and overtired, had conjured the sound. That's what I told myself. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual, trying to reset my schedule. I kept the hallway light on, just in case. I even left on a podcast, something boring background chatter to lull me to sleep. At first, it worked. The soft drone of voices distracted me from the usual racing thoughts. My limbs grew heavy, and for the first time in days, I felt myself drifting off. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Same rhythm, same spot, right beneath me. I turned up the podcast, trying to drown it out, but the tapping grew louder, not aggressive, just closer. This time I couldn't pretend it. It was nothing. My pulse picked up, hammering in my ears. I stared at the ceiling again, but not from insomnia, this time from fear. Every instinct screamed at me, don't move. I don't know how long I lay there like that. 5 minutes? An hour? The tapping finally stopped, but the dread didn't. It clung to the walls, thick and silent. Eventually, I forced myself to sit. I needed to see. I needed to prove to myself that there was nothing there. I reached for the flashlight I kept in my nightstand, hands trembling. The light flickered, then held steady. I leaned over the edge of the bed, breath caught in my throat, and shined the beam underneath. Dust. A few storage boxes. An old pair of slippers. Nothing else. Relief flooded me, but only for a second, because just as I sat back up and turned, off the flashlight, I heard it. A whisper. So faint, I almost missed it. I'm still here. My whole body went rigid. My ears rang with silence. I stared into the darkness, willing it to stay still. But there was nothing else. No tapping, no whisper. Just the quiet hum of the fridge down the hall, and the familiar creak of the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. But I didn't sleep, not that night, and somehow I knew the tapping wasn't over. The day after the whisper, I tried to pretend everything was fine. I went through the motions, showered, dressed, answered emails, but my mind wasn't in any of it. The whisper echoed in the back of my skull, repeating like a looped audio file. I'm still here. Soft, almost playful. Like it knew something I didn't. By evening, the doubt started creeping back in. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe my brain had glitched an auditory hallucination born from stress and sleep deprivation. That happens, right? But when the sun dipped behind the buildings and the familiar dusk settled into my apartment, the fear came crawling back like a slow tide. I left every light on, even the one in the coat closet. I put on music loud enough to fill the silence, but not so loud that I couldn't hear other things. I didn't want silence. Not anymore. Still, when I got into bed, the weight in my chest returned. My bedroom felt different now. Like a place that had changed shape slightly, just enough to be off. The walls felt closer, the shadows longer. I lay there, clutching the covers to my chest, eyes wide open and locked on the ceiling. The only sound was the muffled hum of traffic several floors below, and the dull thrum of my own heartbeat. For a while, it was quiet. And then tap. Just one. My body locked up. Tap, tap, there it was again. Same spot, directly beneath where my head rested. As if it knew exactly where I was. Tap. And then a whisper, softer than before, but clearer. Why won't you look? I shot upright, heart galloping against my ribs. My room looked the same, lamplight casting familiar shapes on the walls, but something was wrong. The air felt colder, thicker, as if the room had inhaled and was holding its breath. I stared down at the floor beside my bed. The idea of shining a light under it again made my skin crawl. The memory of those words, "I'm still here," felt like a warning. I wanted to run, but I didn't know where. My apartment had always been my safe space, but now it felt like a cage. And worse, I didn't know what I was caged in with. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling. I didn't even know who I was going to call: my brother, a friend, the building's security desk. But as I opened the screen, the signal bar vanished. No service, of course. I held the phone to my chest, feeling its useless weight. Tap, tap, tap. It was constant now, unbroken, unnerving. I told myself again that I had to look. I had to know. So I got the flashlight. But this time, I didn't turn it on right away. I just sat there, gripping it, staring at the floor. The tapping was relentless, and beneath it, I began to hear something else. A kind of movement, like fabric brushing against wood. Or nails sliding slowly across the boards. Something was down there. With a shaking hand, I clicked the flashlight on and leaned forward, lowering the beam to the shadows. Dust, cardboard, shadows. I moved the beam slowly, sweeping left and right. At first, nothing, then something moved. It was so fast I barely saw it, just the suggestion of a dark shape slipping out of the light, like something had retreated just out of reach. I pulled the flashlight back with a gasp, heart hammering, and then silence. No tapping, no whisper, just a feeling. One I couldn't describe, except that it made me feel watched. I sat back, against the headboard, and stayed there, all night. I didn't sleep, I didn't dare. By the time the sun came up, I still hadn't moved. My body ached, my eyes stung, but at least daylight brought silence. But the fear didn't leave. It sat with me, patient, waiting for night to fall again. I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't. I looked like hell-sunken eyes, pale skin, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I tried calling my boss to explain, but every time I picked up the phone, I stopped myself. What would I even say? "Sorry, I'm being haunted by something under my bed." Instead, I stayed in, curtains open wide, desperate for sunlight to make everything feel normal. I tried watching TV, but I couldn't focus. I tried reading, but the silence between each turn of the page felt unbearable. I kept glancing at the bedroom doorway, half expecting to see movement in the shadows beyond. When night crept in, panic took hold. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to go anywhere near that bed. So I didn't. I stayed in the living room, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, all of the lights on. I watched mindless shows and kept the volume just high enough to drown out everything else. But even then, I kept the flashlight beside me, just in case. It worked for a while. Until 2:30 a.m., the power cut. Everything went black. The TV snapped off mid-sentence. The lights died. The fridge went silent. I sat in darkness, paralyzed. Then the whisper returned, clear, cold, and far too close. "Why won't you look?" I grabbed the flashlight and turned it on, but it flickered violently, dimming to an orange clutter before failing completely. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, soft, dragging. Something was moving toward me. My breath caught. I froze, too afraid to run, to even turn my head. All I could do was listen. Scrape, scrape. Each sound was deliberate, slow, and far. Too real. And then silence. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, tap. This time, it wasn't under the bed. It was right behind me. I spun, instinct taking over, but the room was pitch black. My eyes adjusted slowly, shapes forming in the dark, but I saw nothing. Still, the sensation of being watched was unbearable, like something was breathing down my neck. Desperate, I lunged toward the kitchen. The emergency flashlight was in the junk drawer. I remember exactly where. I fumbled through batteries, cords, receipts, until my fingers found the plastic handle. Click, light. I turned, sweeping it across the living room. Nothing. No figure. No shadow. Just my apartment. Unchanged. But something was wrong. The floorboards, Near the bedroom door were scratched. Three thin, ragged lines carved deep into the wood, like claws had dragged across it. I stared at them, my mind blank with disbelief. I didn't own a pet. No one had keys to my place. And I hadn't heard those being made. Whatever did that was already inside. I couldn't go back into that room. Instead, I camped out in the bathroom, door locked, flashlight on. I sat in the tub with a blanket and tried to stay awake. Every time my eyes drooped, I forced them open again. I managed to last until morning. When the power returned and the apartment filled with light and the comforting hum of machines, I wanted to believe it was over. I really did. But as I stepped back into the bedroom, heart pounding, I saw something that shattered that hope. There, carved into the wood on the inside of the closet door, were four words, uneven, jagged, as if scratched by a broken fingernail. Don't look down. I didn't put them there. No one did. And suddenly the urge to look beneath the bed returned stronger, more insistent. Like something wanted me to disobey, to look anyway. I almost did, but something told me if I looked again, this time I wouldn't be looking alone. So I backed away. I packed a bag. Just essentials, wallet, charger, a change of clothes, and walked out the front door. I needed to stay somewhere else. Anywhere else. A hotel. A friend's place. Hell, the sidewalk would have felt safer. But as I stepped into the hallway, a familiar chill ran down my spine. Because they're taped to my door with a single piece of black tape was a note written in that same jagged handwriting. Four more words. You're not leaving me. I left the building. Didn't pack the rest of my things. Didn't double check the stove. I just ran. The night air slapped me in the face as I stumbled out onto the sidewalk. Cold, sharp, real. I sucked in deep gulps of it, desperate to anchor myself to something that wasn't the nightmare my apartment had become. My phone still had no signal, but I didn't care. I walked, fast, no destination. I just wanted to put distance between myself and that place. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I expected to see someone or something following. Nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling. After about 20 minutes, I found a cheap motel near the edge of downtown, neon flickering sign, cracked windows. The kind of place you don't ask questions in. Perfect. The man at the desk didn't even look up when I gave him cash. Room 207, second floor. Smelled like mildew and old cigarettes, but it had four walls and a door that locked. That was enough. I shoved a chair under the knob anyway. And then I sat on the edge of the bed. Lights on, blankets untouched. Just sat. For hours, I stared at the door, at the wall, at nothing. My brain wouldn't stop replaying it. The scratching, the whispers, the note. You're not leaving me. That phrase stuck in my head like gum on a shoe sticky. Impossible to get rid of. I didn't sleep, didn't even lie down. When morning came, I tried to convince myself it was over. That whatever it was couldn't follow me here. That it was bound to the apartment. The bed. I showered. Ate a stale granola bar from my bag. Let the motel TV fill the room with static and background noise. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't think it would work, still no bars. But there it was. One new photo message. No sender. Just an image. My heart plummeted as I tapped it open. It was a picture of my motel room taken from inside. I looked around in a panic, but I was alone. Then the faucet turned on. By itself. A thin stream of water gurgled into the sink, and then tap, cap from underneath the bed. No, not again. I stood, backing away slowly, my pulse in my throat. And then my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, it was me. From behind. Sitting on the bed. Just moments ago. There was a shadow in the photo, long, thin, crouched, just behind me, fingers inches from my neck. I dropped the phone. The whispers returned. You can run, but I'm already here. I lunged for the door, yanked the chair away, and fled. Down the stairs out into daylight. breath catching in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the street again. Cars, people, noise. I felt exposed but safer. I called my friend Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. I need to stay with you, I blurted. She didn't ask questions. She knew my voice too well, knew fear when she heard it. Come over, she said. Now. 30 minutes later, I was curled up on her couch, clutching a cup of tea I couldn't drink. She let me talk in pieces out of order fragments of the past few nights. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt me, which made it worse. Maybe it's trauma, she said softly. I'm not imagining this. I believe you. And somehow I knew she meant it. That night, I stayed in her guest room. Small, safe, clean. I checked under the bed 3 times before lying down. Nothing there. Just a hardwood floor and a box of Christmas decorations. Still, I barely slept. But nothing happened. No tapping, no whispers, no movement. For the first time in days, I felt okay until morning. I walked into the kitchen and froze. Rachel was standing at the counter, still, pale, eyes unfocused. Rachel, I whispered. She turned slowly. Her eyes were sunken. Her face was gray. And then she whispered in a voice not her own. He's still under your bed. My blood ran cold. Rachel. She blinked, swayed, like she was waking up from something. What? She asked, confused. What's wrong? I backed away. She didn't remember. She didn't know what she'd just said. That night, I left again. I couldn't stay. Couldn't risk her becoming part of whatever this was. It wasn't just attached to my bed, it was attached to me. I got on a bus heading out of the city. Didn't care where. Just away. I didn't sleep. I kept my eyes on the windows. But by mile 42, my body gave in, just for a second. Just a blink. That's when I heard it, from the seat behind me. Tap, tap, and then don't look down. I didn't move. The voice was right behind me, close enough that I felt its breath, cold, damp brush the hairs on the back of my neck. Tap, tap, tap. The same sickening rhythm, now echoing from beneath my bus seat. I clenched my fists in my lap, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the road ahead. My heart thundered, so loud I was sure someone else on the bus could hear it. But no one turned around, no one noticed. They just sat quietly, staring out the windows like nothing was wrong. Was I the only one hearing this? The tapping continued, patient, persistent. And then a whisper closer, lower, like it was inside. My skull. Look, look. I shook my head. I couldn't, but my body betrayed me. Slowly, trembling, I shifted in my seat and glanced down. A shadow. That's all I saw long. Impossibly thin fingers curling out from beneath my seat, coiling like vines around the floor. I shot up, nearly falling into the aisle. The old woman across from me blinked in surprise. You all right, dear? I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But all I managed was a shaky nod before stumbling toward the front of the bus. I need to get off, I told the driver. He frowned. We're not at a stop. I don't care. He sighed, muttered something under his breath, and finally slowed down. I jumped off before the wheels even stopped fully turning. As the bus pulled away, I could have sworn I saw a face in the back window, pale, watching, grinning. I was on the side of a quiet highway. No buildings in sight, just open road and the edge of a forest. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I started walking. Hours passed. My phone battery was dead. My legs ached, but I kept walking. Eventually, I came upon a gas station half abandoned. Lights flickering inside like they hadn't been changed in years. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The clerk barely looked up. Greasy hair, tired eyes. The kind of man who'd seen too much and cared too little. Bathroom? I asked. He pointed with a grunt. It was a grimy, yellow-lit room with cracked tiles and graffiti on the mirror, but I didn't care. I locked the door, splashed cold water on my face, and sat on the closed toilet seat, trying to collect my thoughts. Then I heard it, not from under the toilet this time, not even from the walls. It came from inside the mirror. That same voice whispering, "Nowhere is safe." The lights flickered violently. I backed into the corner, watching the mirror fog. But I hadn't used hot water. And then words formed in the condensation were already inside. I bolted. Ran past the clerk, who didn't even blink. Outside, the sun was dipping low on the horizon. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, bending in ways that made my stomach twist. Something had followed me out of that apartment. It hadn't stayed behind. It hadn't stayed under the bed. It was with me. It was part of me now. I made a plan. I'd go back, not to the apartment, but to the beginning. My childhood home. Maybe I was wrong to think this thing started recently. Maybe it was older. Maybe it had always been with me. It took 2 more buses, a rideshare, and half a night of walking. But eventually I arrived. The house was dark, empty. It had been years since anyone lived there. After my parents passed, it sat untouched. I hadn't had the strength to sell it. Now it felt like the only place left to run. Inside, it smelled of dust and rot. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets like ghostly shapes frozen in time. I found my old room at the end of the hall, untouched, like a museum exhibit from another life. My old bed was still there. I stared at it, and then I did something I hadn't done in days. I crawled underneath, just to see. The wood beneath was old, cracked, familiar, but something was different. A piece of the floorboard had been pried loose. I pulled it up, heart pounding. Inside was a journal, old, faded, mine. I didn't remember keeping one, but as I flipped through the pages, it was all my handwriting, all entries from when I was 8. Every page mentioned the same thing. The tapping is back. It's under my bed again. The voice told me not to tell. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't new. It wasn't just following me. It had been with me my whole life. Suddenly the air shifted, cold, heavy, and then, "Welcome home." The voice was louder than ever. Right behind me, I turned. A tall, impossibly thin figure stood in the doorway. Its face was a blur of shadows, its arms unnaturally long. In its hand, it held a broken piece of my old bed frame. Tap, tap. It raised a finger to its non-existent lips and whispered, "Time to look under again." I couldn't move. The figure in the doorway was motionless too, but its presence pressed against me like a physical force dense, suffocating. It filled the air, the walls, the spaces between my bones. My old journal lay open on the floor, and every page suddenly made sense. This thing had always been with me, watching, waiting, growing. The shadows behind it shifted, too alive too. Be just darkness. I stumbled backward, still crouched under the bed. My childhood bed, the place it had first found me. My breath came in shallow gasps, and the floor creaked beneath me as if it too was trying to warn me. Run. But I didn't run. I couldn't. Not this time. I had been running my whole life. It always followed. I always found a way back. I had to face it. I crawled out from under the bed, every muscle screaming in protest. The figure still stood, there, perfectly still, holding that jagged piece of wood like it was sacred. Its face, if it had one, was a swirling void, impossible to focus on. But I felt it watching, waiting. Why me? I asked, my voice a rasp. The figure didn't answer, but the walls did. From every direction, a chorus of whispers rose. Because you looked. Because you listened. Because you remembered. I stepped forward, shaking. What are you? A low, guttural sound vibrated through the house. Laughter, maybe. Or something worse. The journal at my feet snapped shut on its own. The lights above flickered, then exploded, plunging the house into darkness, and the tapping began again, louder than it had ever been. Tap, 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 not from the floor, not from under the bed. It was coming from inside the walls. Inside me, I clutched my ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, like it lived in my bones now. The figure began to move, slow, methodical, It stepped forward into the room, ducking slightly to fit under the frame of the door. Its limbs were too long. Its fingers dragged behind it, leaving black smears across the floorboards. It crouched where I had stood seconds ago and tilted its faceless head toward the bed, like it was remembering or savoring. You've always been mine, it whispered. And I remembered the night I first heard the tapping when I was a child. I had cried for my parents, but they said it was just a bad dream. I learned to stay silent. I learned not to look. Until I did, and it never left, I backed into the corner of the room. The figure crept closer, now crawling like an insect, its limbs bending at impossible angles. Its voice was everywhere now. You brought me with you. Every time you fled, every time you feared, you fed me. I screamed, louder than I ever had in my life. A scream full of every sleepless night, every breathless moment, every time I dared to hope it was over. The thing stopped. Something changed. The journal on the floor burst into flame, lighting the room in a sudden flash of orange and red. The figure recoiled, its form flickering like smoke caught in a gust. I didn't think I acted. I grabbed the flaming journal and hurled it onto the bed. The sheets caught immediately, fire roaring up the canopy and crawling along the walls like it had been waiting to ignite. The thing let out a sound high and piercing, not pain, not rage, but disappointment. It melted into the shadows, which twisted and squirmed like living creatures fleeing the light. The house burned. I ran. Outside, I collapsed in the middle of the front yard, the flames behind me towering into the sky. I watched my childhood home, everything it held, be reduced to ash, but I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake. What if fire couldn't kill it? What if it wanted me to destroy the house? Remove the last place it could be contained? What if it was never trapped? In the bed, or the apartment, or the house? What if it was always in me? I sat on the curb until the fire trucks came. The firefighters asked questions. I didn't answer. I just stared at the smoke curling into the sky. When I finally returned to the city weeks later, I moved into a new place. Modern, bright, no shadows. I threw away my bed frame. I sleep on the floor now. No room for anything to hide beneath me. And still, every night as I close my eyes, I hear it, soft, rhythmic, patient, tap, tap, and a whisper just beneath the sound of my breath. I'm still here. I wish I could say it was just the alcohol. That what I saw that night was a blur of drunken imagination, some fever dream my brain stitched together from urban legends and horror movies. I wish I could believe that. I really do. But no dream has ever left scars. No hallucination whispers your name when you're stone sober. And no nightmare keeps following you after you wake up. It was a Friday night. One of those late summer evenings where the air still clings to the heat of the day, heavy and electric, like the sky is holding its breath. My friends and I had hit up a couple of bars, cheap places with sticky floors and flickering lights, where the beer flows fast and nobody remembers anything the next day. We were loud, sloppy, the kind of drunk where everything's hilarious and time doesn't feel real. Tom kept tripping over curbs, and Jake couldn't stop trying to freestyle rap about tacos. My cheeks hurt from laughing. For a while, it felt like every other Friday, dumb, forgettable, fun. Until someone I genuinely can't remember who suggested we take the shortcut. You know the woods behind the train yard? They said, cuts across straight to Riverside. We'll shave like 20 minutes off. I didn't even blink. We all just veered off the road, hopped a crumbling fence, and followed the dirt path into the trees. No hesitation. Not a second of doubt. But the moment we stepped under the canopy, the air changed. It wasn't just cooler, it was still. Unnaturally still, like the whole forest had been paused. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of our own footsteps crunching over dead leaves. It felt like the entire world had shifted an inch to the left, and we hadn't noticed. We joked about it at first. Tom made some dumb Blair Witch crack. Jake tried to imitate Spooky. Wind noises. I laughed with them, but the sound came out hollow. My skin was crawling and I didn't know why. The path twisted deeper between the trees, winding through brush that looked untouched for years. Everything around us felt off, like the woods weren't real. The trees leaned in strange angles, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers. The moonlight filtered through the leaves in weird patterns, jagged and too sharp casting shadows that didn't quite move right. And then we heard it. A sound distant at first, faint, like wind moving through tall grass. But there was no wind. I stopped walking, instinct prickling the back of my neck. Did you hear that? Jake turned around, blinking. Hear what? I hesitated. Like whispering? He laughed. Bro, you're spooked already? I tried to laugh it off too. Guess I'm more drunk than I thought. But I wasn't. We kept moving, and the whispering came again closer this time. Still too soft to understand, but rhythmic almost, like chanting. It sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. The temperature had dropped. I could see my breath now, hanging in the air like fog. That's when I realized something. We hadn't passed a single landmark. No trail signs, no fallen trees, no squirrels, no birds. It was like we were walking in place, circling deeper into some place we weren't supposed to be. The deeper we went, the more the silence pressed against us. It wasn't just absence of sound, it was resistance. Like the forest didn't want. You was there. Maybe we should turn back, I said, trying to sound casual. Tom barked a laugh. What, scared of squirrels? Jake snorted. Relax, man. We're almost through. I wanted to argue to tell them something felt wrong, but I didn't know how to explain it without sounding crazy. So I stayed quiet. We all did. Then, without warning, the trees opened up. We stepped into a clearing perfectly round, as if carved out with a blade. The grass was short, unnaturally neat, and in the center stood a ring of ancient stones. 7 of them, towering and jagged, spaced evenly in a wide circle. Each one was covered in carvings, runes, or symbols I couldn't recognize, etched deep into the surface like scars. They shimmered faintly in the moonlight, almost like they were breathing. Tom stepped forward first, peering at one of the stones. What the hell is this? Some kind of old monument? Nobody answered. The air inside the clearing was freezing. My ears rang with silence, and for a split second, I was sure I saw something move between the stones, something thin, fast, hunched low to the ground. Let's go, I said quietly. We shouldn't be here. But nobody moved. We just stood there, staring at the stones like we were caught in a trance. My heart pounded in my ears, and I swear I heard something whisper my name again closer, this time, right behind me. I turned. Nothing. I looked back at the stones, and that's when I saw it. One of the symbols on the closest stone was glowing, just faintly, like it had been freshly carved. And for some reason, I felt drawn to it, pulled against every instinct. I stepped forward, and that was the moment I made the worst mistake of my life. I don't know what made me reach out. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was something else, something the forest had put inside me. Whatever it was, I stepped closer to the stone, stretched out my hand, fingers trembling. The surface was colder than ice. Not just cold to the touch cold that sank. Straight into my bones, like it was draining the warmth out of me. The instant my skin made contact, I felt something shift. Not around me, inside me. A sound erupted from the trees. Not a whisper this time. A scream. High-pitched, layered, like 100 mouths all shrieking at once. I yanked my hand back. Behind me, Tom shouted, "What the hell did you do?" But I couldn't answer. My legs buckled and I dropped to my knees, ears ringing. The entire clearing was vibrating, the ground humming like it was alive. The runes on all 7 stones pulsed with light, first red, then blue, then something. I don't even have a name for it. Something that made my eyes water to look at. Jake was yelling now, pulling at my arm. "We need to go." I tried to stand, but the ground beneath us split with a deafening crack like the earth itself was tearing. Open. The stones groaned, and I swear they began to shift inward, slowly closing like the jaws of some ancient beast. Run! Someone screamed, I don't know who. It didn't matter. The clearing fell away. One moment, I was on my feet. The next, I was falling. No bottom, no end, just an endless drop into blackness. My stomach lurched, my throat clamped shut, and the light from the clearing vanished above me like a snuffed out candle. The fall went on forever. I don't know how long. I was in free fall seconds, minutes, hours. There was no wind, no sensation of movement, just endless black swallowing everything. And then suddenly I hit the ground hard. The impact knocked every breath from my lungs. I lay there stunned, listening to my own gasping sobs echo around. And when I finally opened my eyes, I saw nothing, not even my own hands. Total darkness and silence. The kind of silence that eats you from the inside out. Tom, I croaked. Jake? No response. Just the soft drip of water somewhere nearby, and a smell. Damp earth, mold, something metallic underneath. Like old pennies or blood. Panic surged through me. I scrambled to my feet, hands outstretched in the dark. The floor beneath me was rough, uneven stone or dirt. I couldn't tell. I took a step and felt my shoes squish into something soft, wet. I didn't look down. I didn't want to know. Then, from behind me, footsteps. Not fast, not running. Just one after another. Deliberate. Getting closer. I spun, heart hammering in my chest. Who's there? No answer. But I could feel something watching me. Like eyes pressed into the back of my skull. Then came the voice. It wasn't loud. Just a whisper, right in my ear. You shouldn't have touched it. I flinched, spinning in every direction. My hands hit nothing but air. Show yourself. I shouted, the sound bouncing wildly off unseen walls. But there was no one. That's when I saw it. A tiny, flickering light in the distance. Pale orange, like a candle's flame. It bobbed once, then held steady. A beacon in the dark. I didn't think. I just started walking toward it, half stumbling, arms out. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the tunnel was amplifying my fear. The path narrowed, the walls pressing in, moist and breathing like the inside of a mouth. I tried not to imagine what would happen if the light went out. As I got closer, the walls began to glow faintly, just enough to reveal markings etched into the stone. Symbols, runes, same as the stones in the clearing. Only here they writhed when I looked at them, moved. They crawled along the walls like living things. The tunnel opened into a chamber huge, domed, and pulsating with dim orange light from torches that hadn't been lit in years. The air here was thick, heavy with dust and decay. At the center of the room stood another ring of stones, but these were different. These bled. Dark, glistening stains slicked their bases. The symbols etched into them glowed a dull crimson, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. In the center of it all stood an altar stone, cracked, covered in what looked like dried blood and bits of bone. And on that altar was a knife, old, rusted, its blade blackened with age or something far worse. I wanted to run. Every fiber of me screamed to turn around, to get out, to claw my way back to the surface, even if it killed me. But my feet moved forward, not by choice. I stepped into the circle. The moment I crossed the threshold, the torches blazed to life. All at once, and the whispers came rushing back, no longer faint, no longer distant. They were inside me now, loud and vicious, chanting in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. Finish it. Complete the offering, complete the pact. I didn't know what pact they meant, but I knew I was in too deep to turn. Back now, and somehow some terrible part of me didn't want to. The knife was warm. That's what I remember most when I picked it up, how wrong it felt. The air in the chamber was freezing, my skin covered in goosebumps, my breath puffing. In clouds, but the blade, it pulsed with heat. Alive, almost. It shouldn't have been possible. Metal doesn't feel like that. But this wasn't just metal, it was something older. something made from more than iron and rust. And the moment I touched it, the voices changed. They didn't whisper anymore. They sang. Low, guttural chants rose in the chamber like a choir of the damned. I couldn't understand the words, not really, but they didn't feel foreign. They felt dot, 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 dot buried. Ancient syllables that dug themselves out of some dark corner of my mind. Words I shouldn't have known, but did. Blood. Must feed the gate. One voice hissed clearer than the rest. Right behind me, I spun around, but the chamber was empty. Still, I wasn't alone. I felt them. Hundreds of eyes watching from the shadows beyond the torchlight. Shapes that didn't move but breathed. The stones, the air, the whispers, they were alive. And they were waiting. I looked down at the blade in my hand. The metal glistened, catching the flickering light. In the center of the altar, I now saw a shallow basin carved with the same writhing symbols. Dried blood caked the edges. My blood had already awakened this place when I touched the first stone above. Now, it wanted more. A part of me, a small, terrified human part, screamed to stop. But another part, something that had been growing. Ever since I entered the forest, leaned forward, curious, compelled. So I raised the knife. I pressed it to my palm, watching my own hand tremble. The blade bit into my skin with a hiss. Not sharp hungry. It sliced deeper than it should have. The blood poured fast, thick, too dark. As it dripped into the altar's basin, the chamber breathed. That's the only way I can describe it. The walls flexed outward, then inward, like lungs exhaling. The torches flared. The symbols on the stones surged to life, blazing bright red, and then the altar cracked open. It split down the center with a sound like bone breaking. Beneath it, darkness, not absence of light, but presence of something else. Black and thick and moving like oil on water. From that hole, they came. Arms. Thin, sinewy, wrong. They crawled out, first fingers with too many joints, nails like needles. Then came the heads. Faceless, eyeless, mouths, stitched shut, but grinning anyway. They pulled themselves halfway through the altar, like swimmers breaching the surface of a frozen lake. They didn't attack, they reached, for me. Welcome. The voices moaned. You are the vessel. You opened the gate. You are the door. I stumbled back, my bloody hand slick around the knife. No, I didn't, but I had. Deep down, I knew it. Whatever pact this was, I'd sealed it the moment I touched that first stone. Everything since had been a formality. The shadows reached farther. They didn't want to drag me in. They wanted to merge. Suddenly the pain in my palm intensified. The cut writhed, moved. The symbols I'd seen on the walls burned themselves into my skin, glowing, pulsing. My blood wasn't just leaking into the altar. It was being taken. Siphon, you carry the mark, the voices said. You are the bridge. The chamber began to collapse. The walls cracked, chunks of stone fell, and the torches guttered one by one. A howl rose from below the altar animalistic, endless. And in that moment, I made a choice. I didn't know. What would happen? I didn't have a plan. I just reacted. With every ounce of strength I had left, I drove the knife down into the altar, straight through the heart of the symbols. There was no scream, no explosion, just dot, dot, dot silence. The shadows paused. The light died, and everything went still. Then the altar crumbled. Like dust in a breeze, it dissolved, taking the arms and faces and symbols with it. The air turned hot, thick like tar, and a force, something I couldn't see, pushed me backward. I flew across the room, landed hard against the stone wall, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in my bed. Not the forest, not the clearing, not the underground chamber, just home. My sheets were soaked with sweat, my clothes were filthy. Mud on the carpet. Scratches on my arms, but no cut on my hand. No mark. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. A hallucination, a nightmare. Something my drunk, tired brain had cooked up to scare me. Until I looked in the mirror, at first nothing seemed off. I looked pale, shaken, normal. But then my reflection smiled. And I didn't. It was subtle, just a twitch of the lips, but it wasn't mine. I stood there frozen as the reflection, blinked once, slowly, then whispered, "You brought us home." At first, I told myself it was just exhaustion, stress, maybe even psychosis. After all, who wouldn't crack a little after what I'd seen, after what I'd done? But I couldn't lie to myself for long, because the reflection didn't stop smiling. Every time I looked into a mirror, it was the same. At first, it mimicked me like normal blinking when I blinked, lifting its hand when I lifted mine. But if I stared too long, let my guard down, even for a second, it would slip. A flicker of something else behind the eyes, a smirk when I wasn't smiling, a blink when I didn't move, and then one night it spoke again. "We see you." 3 words, quiet, calm, and completely wrong. It didn't move its lips when it said it, just stared, as the words echoed in my head like they were bouncing off the inside of my skull. I screamed and shattered the mirror with my bare hands. Blood pooled at my feet, my real blood this time. But even then, the glass shards on the floor still showed. That smile mocking me, wide and toothy. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep the next night either. Or the next. I tried. God, I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that cavern. Back in the stone circle. Back under that pulsing, bloody altar, surrounded by whispers. Worse, sometimes I woke up somewhere else. Not in my bed, not in my room. Once I woke up outside. In the woods. Shoes muddy. No coat. Phone dead. No idea how I got there. Another time, I woke up in the hallway of my apartment building. Nails torn. Door locked from the inside. And always, I heard the whisper just before waking. "You are the door." I tried to call Tom and Jake and everyone else from that night. No one answered. I went to Tom's apartment, knocked, rang the buzzer. Banged on the door, nothing. It wasn't just like he was gone. It was like he'd never existed. The mail slot was empty. His name wasn't on the buzzer anymore. The neighbors didn't even recognize his picture. "Are you sure they lived here?" they asked. "That unit's been empty for months." I broke in eventually. The place was hollow. No furniture, no clothes, no trace of anyone ever living there. I found one thing, though. On the wall of the empty bedroom, scratched into the paint in jagged, almost childlike handwriting. It followed him home. I left the apartment without. Looking back, I didn't even take the elevator. I ran down 6 flights of stairs, heart in my throat. That night, I heard scratching under my bed. The symbols came back. Not carved into ancient stone or flickering on cave walls, but on my skin. They started small, one on my shoulder. Then my back, then my chest. Faint glowing patterns that pulsed beneath the surface, like veins full of fire. They didn't hurt, but they itched, moved, and worse, they started appearing on walls. In the steam on my bathroom mirror, on the fogged-up windows, carved into tree trunks along my street. It was like the world was cracking, and whatever lived on the other side was trying to seep through. I tried burning sage, salt, cold showers, psychics. One medium screamed the second I walked in. Said my aura was bleeding, that something had attached itself to me like a leech. Another told me flat out, "You've been marked." There's no one doing that. I asked her what it meant. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It doesn't want you dead. It wants you open." I started recording myself while I slept, just in case. The footage was mostly blank tossing and turning, the occasional groan or mumble, until the 5th night. That night, the video showed me standing in the center of my room, completely still, for 3 hours. Eyes wide open, not blinking, not breathing, just watching the camera. At 3:17 a.m., I whispered something. I played the audio over and over, but the words weren't in English. They weren't in any language I recognized. Still, they made my stomach turn and my ears ring every time I listened. But it was my voice, clear as day. Later that week, I found another message scratched into my bathroom wall, this time in my handwriting. "Let them through. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember anything anymore. The days bleed into nights. Sometimes I forget where I am, who I am, but the voices, they never forget me. They're always there, whispering, laughing, waiting. I haven't seen my own reflection in days. I cover the mirrors now. Don't turn on lights. Don't trust what I see. But deep down, I know the truth. I didn't escape the forest. I brought it back with me. And it's still hungry. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, that the worst had already happened. I was wrong. Because now it's not just the reflections or the symbols of the voices. Now it's me. There are moments longer every day when I'm not in control. I'll come to and find I've moved things around the apartment. Opened the windows, rearranged furniture, written things down in languages I don't understand. Once I woke up standing in the shower, fully clothed, water running ice cold. But the worst moment came 2 nights ago. I woke up holding the knife, the same one from the altar, the one I left behind or thought I had. But here it was in my hand, heavy and cold, its rusted blade somehow sharper than before. I dropped it and backed away, breath ragged, eyes wide. It clattered on the floor with a sound too loud, too sharp, like it cut the silence itself. I tried to get rid of it. I threw it in the river. The next morning, it was back on my pillow. That was when I realized I was never supposed to leave that place. I didn't walk away. I was released on purpose. Because I am not just haunted anymore. I'm a vessel. There's a voice inside me now. Not just whispering, but speaking. Commanding. It calls itself Asaroth. I don't know what that means, but when I Googled the name, my computer crashed. And when I rebooted it, the homepage had changed to a single black screen with red glowing text. You open the gate. Now we walk your world. At first, I resisted it, fought it like a fever. But it's strong. It knows me. It uses my memories like weapons, wraps them around me like chains. Sometimes it speaks using my mother's voice. Sometimes it sounds like Tom, laughing the way he did that night. Sometimes it just screams. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. I was walking home. I hadn't slept in 2 days. The voices were loud that night, demanding, almost ecstatic. Someone bumped into me on the sidewalk. Just a stranger. He muttered something, maybe an apology. I didn't even see his face clearly. But when I blinked, I was standing over him. My hands were soaked, red, and he wasn't moving. The knife was in my pocket. I don't know what I did. I ran, got rid of my clothes, scrubbed my skin raw. But no matter what I did, I still saw the blood on my hands. Still heard the voice. One soul, down. The door grows wider. I don't eat much anymore. My body doesn't feel like mine. My skin is pale, almost gray in some places. My eyes burn constantly, like there's fire behind them. People avoid me on the street. Strangers cross the road when I walk by. I tried going to a priest. He wouldn't even touch me. Sad I had no light left. He asked me to leave before he'd even offer a prayer. I tried to laugh it off, but something inside me enjoyed it. Enjoyed the way his hands trembled when I stepped closer. The way the holy water hissed when it touched my skin. It's not just voices anymore. I've started seeing figures. Shadows that move when they shouldn't. Tall, lanky shapes with 2 long limbs and no faces. They flicker in and out of reality, standing at the foot of my bed, lurking in doorways, waiting behind corners. I don't know if they're real or if I finally snapped, but they're watching, always watching, waiting for something. Sometimes I hear them speak to each other, not in words, but in that same language from the forest. A tongue that tastes like ash and blood in my mouth. And sometimes when I'm not paying attention. My mouth moves with theirs. Hours, days. I look at the clock and it's morning. Then I blink and the sun's gone. I found a journal under my bed today written in my handwriting, but I don't remember writing it. Pages filled with strange drawings, sigils, spirals, maps of stars. I don't recognize. Diagrams of bodies split open, labeled in that same inhuman language. One entry chilled me to the bone. It was dated next week. The door is ready. Final vessel stable. Alignment complete. He will rise in flesh. He will rise. I don't think I have much time left. Something's coming. Every night, the veil between this world and the other thins. The symbols glow brighter, the air grows colder. The reflections smile wider, and I can feel something inside me, stretching, ready to tear its way out. I'm not me anymore. Not really. Sometimes I catch myself referring to myself as we. Sometimes I smile without meaning to. I don't want to do what's coming, but I don't think I have a choice. My body is a puppet now, and the strings are held by something far older than anything in this world. If you're reading this, don't try to find me. Don't go near the forest. Don't touch the stones, and whatever you do, don't listen. To the whispers, they'll sound like your name. And that's how it starts. The whispers never stop now. They follow me into dreams, into the shower, into the seconds between heartbeats. I don't know where the voice ends and I begin. I don't even know if there's still a me to separate from it. But tonight is different because tonight, the stars are right. I didn't understand the drawings before. The sigils, the blood-stained constellations, the lines across calendars and skin. But now I do. Now I feel it, the alignment. It hums through my bones like electricity, vibrating with impossible rhythm. I walk without direction, but know exactly where I'm going. Back to the woods, back to the clearing, back to where it all began. As I walk through the city streets, the air distorts. Street lights flicker and explode. Phones ring with no one on the line. Dogs bark at nothing, and people pause in confusion, staring at me like they've seen death wearing human skin. I don't stop. I can't. The forest is darker than before darker than night should be. The trees seem to lean inward, welcoming me like I belong here now, like I've always belonged. The stones are waiting. They remember me. And this time, they are not dormant. I step into the circle. The symbols flare, not glowing, but burning. The ground quakes. The air tastes like rotten iron. The wind shrieks with voices. And I realize it's not a storm. It's the choir of the damned, celebrating the return of their gatekeeper. Because that's what I've become. The vessel, the voice, the door. My body stiffens as the sigils on my skin reappear, glowing with blinding red light. My mouth opens without my command. I speak in a language older than earth, syllables cracking reality with every word. The earth splits again. But this time, no one falls in. This time, something rises out. It's enormous, not in size, in presence. It's like looking at the idea of darkness, the shape of absence, a being not made of flesh, but of thought and shadow and hunger. Its eyes, if they can be called that, burn with cold fire, and every breath it takes bends the world around. I should be terrified, but I feel only purpose. The entity doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. I know what it wants. The final offering. Me, as I kneel before it, knife in hand, the whispers roar in triumph. But then I hear something else, a memory, a voice. My mother's, real this time, not twisted by the thing inside me. She's reading to me at bedtime. I'm 6. I'm safe. That memory, that tiny spark is enough. And suddenly, I fight. Not with muscle, not with magic, with will. I scream not in fear, but in rebellion. I turn the blade not toward my chest, but toward the stones, toward the gate, and I carve a new symbol one not in the ancient language, but in my own. A name. Mine. The circle shudders. The air rips. The shadows shriek not in triumph now, but in pain. Everything begins to unravel. The creature howls, sucked back toward the pit, claws of nothing grasping at the stones. The ground splits again, no longer controlled, but wild, erratic. The forest burns with light, brighter than the moon, purging every trace of the corruption. I fall to my knees, the sigils burning off my skin like ash in the wind. The knife melts in my hand. And with one final scream, the creature is gone. The whispers stop. The forest is silent. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. They said I was found in the woods half naked, dehydrated, covered in strange burns. They think it was a psychotic break, that I imagined the whole thing, but I know better. Because every night, just before I fall asleep, I hear it, not a whisper, not a scream, a breath. Like something just outside the veil is still watching, still waiting, and every so often, my reflection flickers again, still smiling.